introduce mega agent and the person behind all this, Cindy Cole. And then the queen of the ball, our business center leader from Navarre, Linda Grayson.
But starting with Linda and her passion, her one thing, I think, is what we've identified is her confidence and her passion about negotiating. So let's start real briefly with you telling us how many people are on your team, and do any of those guys negotiate?
Yes, of course. We have 3 people on the team, so it's
Sorry.
it's me. I have a buyer's agent, Susan Sharp, and an admin, and we all negotiate. I mean, your admins are negotiating, and then your buyer's agent. We're always negotiating. We're negotiating with our family. We're negotiating, and with everything that we do throughout our life. It's part of life. So yes, everyone negotiates.
So small team that you lead over in Navarre. When we first started talking, I loved how you synopsized your philosophy behind negotiating, which you synopsized basically in an attitude that permeates what you do. So tell the group a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, I said I believe my philosophy is to let go of the control while maintaining the control, right? So what I mean by that is don't try to force people into square pegs, or round holes. You need to provide the knowledge. You need to provide the information that they need. You need to allow them to come to some conclusions. However, you need to guide them along the way. So, because we don't control the buyer or the seller. It's their money, it's their decision. So I like to say, let them make these decisions. Just allow for the guidance. And that's what we do. We guide people along. We don't control people.
Right. I'm going to ask you some specific scenarios that, frankly, I face, perhaps some of you as well. I'll start with how much research do you do on either the other agent or the buyer or the seller prior to making an offer or to responding to an offer? I don't think everybody does that.
It depends. Are you dealing with a client that needs all the statistics and needs the charts and graphs? Are they an engineer or are they an accountant? You have to provide a lot of data to these people. Are they someone that's touchy-feely? Maybe not so much, or they respond emotionally. So you connect with them emotionally. So as far as how much, you always want, you have to know your market, okay? You have to be knowledgeable about your market, and you have to know your contracts, and you have to know your listing agreements, and you have to be confident. So, you're going to start there, and then you're going to provide information based on the type of personality that you're dealing with.
How do you deal with jerks? You've got a few of those, right? The temper tantrum, or the minimum of the one who needs the last word, and whether that comes from being evil or insecure, there's still a way to deal with it.
I give them the last word. I let them say whatever they need to say. I allow them to vent, to call me very ugly names if need be, and I say, I understand how you feel. So at that point, what I do is I document by either email or however, whatever communication, facts. The seller said this, the buyer said this, right? So I stay out of it. I don't try to opine. I don't try to tell them they're wrong. I merely allow them to vent, and then I step back away from it. Because I find a lot of times if we try to control something, that's the worst thing we can do. It's the best thing that we can do is to just try to steer the ship, but allow them to be the captain. And a lot of times people, you tell him this. You tell him I'm not going to take a penny less than this. Okay, so then I'll send an email and say the buyer says that they're going to offer this amount of money, and then I don't usually say, and I'm not a penny more. I just, and I put that in writing, and then I copy them. So I just try to be very factual when I'm dealing with people that are jerks, right? And I try not to get pulled into it. It's very hard not to get pulled into it because they know everything. They know so much more than you do, and so you're just a realtor, really? So I try not to allow them to do that to me. I acknowledge that they're frustrated, and then I just provide information and walk away. You always need to be able to walk away. The money's never worth it.
They've insulted me, and you shared a philosophy on inspection results or a technique that you use to prepare a seller for inspection results that I liked.
Well, I let the sellers know that, our inspection is scheduled for Tuesday. And I can assure you that you're not going to like what the inspector has to say. Your baby's not ugly. It's just a normal baby with normal baby problems, right? And so they're going to discover some things that you perhaps didn't know about, or perhaps you did know about it, right? So what we do is we're going to work through this, and we're going to determine which of these items are things that we need to address, and we're going to take care of this. We're going to, but I want them to know, to be prepared that the inspector is going to write up that the dog dug a hole under the fence, so that they don't start going off at me when they see the report.
Yeah.
So just prepare them to be a little bit agitated when they receive the report.
I think that's a dialogue that we could all add in our checklist, because I certainly don't do that right now, but that's a great point. Trust or lack of trust is a major obstacle in our business. I mean, let's just face it, we're not an innately trusted profession. We're just not. And my favorite is, who are you working for, them or me? So how do you deal with that when you feel that you've lost trust, or perhaps they didn't have trust in you to begin with, maybe unearned, maybe simply because of our profession?
Well, it depends. Once again, what is my relationship with this particular person? Am I a single agent working for the seller? Then I explain that I am a single agent. I owe you the duty of honesty and loyalty, and I describe my duties to them. And so I am your girl. I'm here for you, so I'm here to make sure you get the most amount of money in the least amount of time. That's my job. Now, if a buyer comes along and they are from my group or my database, or we bring the buyer, then I will be in a different position at that point. I will then be a transaction broker. Some sellers don't want you to be a transaction broker. And then what I will do is explain that I understand that and I will respect that. However, that we could have other agents in our company that will bring a buyer. And normally they're okay with that. So I try to let them know that I am there for them. I mean, I represent them, and it is my intention to do that fully. Unless we get into the transaction broker situation.
I think that's much easier as a single agent, and that's been really refreshing to do that, and then hopefully transition along the way with Keller Williams. But let's talk about buyers for a minute. I think that one of the things we all deal with right now is people are living a few years in the past where you run across a buyer who wants to make a really low offer. So how do you convince that buyer that that's not going to work out, and how do you get that offer up?
Well, first of all, I'm going to present all offers. Okay, so I let them know that I'm going to present their offer. However, I'm going to provide them the information, the comps that show otherwise. And this, in my opinion, is a long shot. But I'm going to present it. I'm not going to render that opinion to the other agent, and then we're going to see what the response is. I don't argue with them about it. I just kind of prepare them that most likely this is not going to fly, right? And so when we're dealing with investors, they know that, right? Most of the time they know that. So they want to throw it out there anyway, and so I do. I present all offers, even the lowball offers. Now, what I do like to do is I like to have a conversation with the agent when I present the offer. The buyer has requested that I present this offer. And I am doing so. Do the best you can with me here, right? Let's try to put this together and move forward. I do think that our relationships with our other agents are so valuable. Sometimes I talk with the agents about what's going on with the situation and why, I think we can push this through. To me, forming honest relationships with other agents will get us so far in this industry.
Right. How do you deal with a new agent that may have no negotiating experience?
First of all, don't quote me the line, the page, and the number. That makes me crazy. So, we're working together, so it's not you've just gotten out of school, and so you've got all this knowledge, and so you need to, spew it somewhere. But for seasoned agents, we don't need to know the exact line number. It's not an adversarial situation. We're here to work together, okay? So let's work together to put this deal together. So I think my biggest frustration with new agents is that they may know a little bit more as far as what's more up to date on certain things, but in the big scheme of things, for people that have been around a long time, we understand that those relationships that we form with one another and being able to respect one another and move forward, is so much more valuable than trying to act like you have a lot of knowledge about something. But not that there's anything wrong with new agents. I love you dearly. And I want to say this about new agents. When I was a new agent, I would ask the agent. I would say, I'm a new agent. Please help me with this, right? I really, if you can help me with this, tell me what I'm doing wrong, suggest to me what we need to do to make this happen. I appreciate that. I think that goes a long way.
I think that's great advice, and I still do it. Dean, help. You expanded on this a little bit earlier, but any wisdoms for working with the buyer and the seller in the same transaction? You talked about transitioning, but how do you draw that middle ground and feel safe in it?
Sometimes it's tricky being in the middle when you have the buyer and the seller. What I try to do is I become Switzerland. I get very neutral when I'm in that position. I don't form opinions at that point. Then I start very specifically documenting everything. The buyer says this, the seller says this, and I go back and forth in that fashion. And it does get tricky. I was telling Cindy about a recent transaction I had with a seller that had $21,000 worth of wood rot who refused to repair it, and a low appraisal that he refused to negotiate the cost on, right? And I had both sides of the deal. So what I did is I said to the buyer, the seller will not move off of the purchase price. I know that the appraisal said this, okay? Because there's nothing I can do at that point, right? Except to relay to the buyer what the seller is telling me. And the seller refuses to repair anything, right? Of course, the buyer at that point, is either going to walk or they're going to want the property bad enough that they take a look at whether or not they want to move forward. And of course, then you have the lender involved, right? I just become very, very neutral when I have both sides. Just, don't form opinions and don't put them in writing. If you have an opinion, don't put it in writing.
Yeah. My last question for you. How do you respond to, will you reduce your commission during the transaction?
It's 6%. Any questions? And quite honestly, I do reduce my commission, right? I do what everyone else does, which is, it's going to be split 4 ways. My broker's going to get a percentage. I'm going to get a percentage. The buyer's agent's going to get a percentage. The buyer's broker's going to get a percentage. By the end of the day, it's going to be X. And then, of course, I'm going to negotiate. If I negotiated my commission down, would I do something like this during the deal? And then, you've got the $6, there's a lot of different ways to respond to the commission question. But at the end of the day, I'm going to work hard for you. I'm going to get your house sold. I'm going to get you the most money in the least amount of time. I know my business. I know how to do this. You're going to be so happy that you've chosen me, that this is going to be a non-issue for you. Mm-hmm. So, you can go about it any way that you want to. And quite honestly, if they really do beat me down, I might go down to 5. But first of all, I take the hard stance. Mm-hmm. I think you just have to be extremely adaptable because negotiations are not linear. So we start with the end in sight, right? But what happens along the way is very rocky. So stay calm, sometimes step back away from it when it gets very complicated and overwhelming and you think there's no way that this deal is going to happen. I mean, there's just no way. I think the best thing to do is at that point is not to go at it more fiercely. I really think the better way to do is to kind of step back away from it for a minute. And sometimes these people who are not going to do that, and you tell them this, they'll call you back the next morning and they've reconsidered. So a lot of times just step back away from it. I would tell you, and just be very adaptable, and know your market and be confident. Right? And when they ask you for information, provide it. And don't try to control things. I think that's my number one thing, is to not try to control things. I think when we allow the deal to kind of work itself through, it works out in the way it's supposed to. I don't make a decision I don't decide what a lowball offer is. I don't decide what the buyer should offer. I'm going to present their offer. And if the seller rejects their offer, the seller's rejected their offer, I'm not going to form an opinion about that, right? But what I would say to the listing agent when I presented the offer is, thank you for presenting the offer, and then thank you for your response. Because so many times that I have thought that there's no way that they're going to take this offer, they take the offer.
Just out of curiosity, for agents that have been doing this business for a long time, as you probably know, we have an inventory problem. We're down to 4.5 months. I got buyers. I got nothing to sell. Have you seen this kind of market happen before?
Oh, we love this. We love this. We love it when the sellers are making money. And, honestly, I prefer a seller's market. And this is a great time to go out and get some listings because they're going to sell fast. This is a wonderful time to be a real estate agent, is when we are in a market of less than 6 months of inventory. So just go out and aggressively get the listings.
Why do you like a seller's market?
I just think sellers should make money. I mean, we've been through so many years where, the sellers have been upside down and, the lending has been difficult and it's just been a rocky road and it's taken us quite a while to get turned around. Obviously real estate is cyclical, but this cycle was it was extended. So I'm grateful to be in this sort of market.
Just as a quick follow-up, are there any techniques that if you can't find the house that they want to buy because of the inventory challenge, are there any techniques that you can use to kind of keep them on the back burner so that when inventory does turn around, they'll be ready?
Don't wait for inventory to turn around. You need to go knock on some doors of some houses that look like it would be something that they would want. Make phone calls. Who's out there that, I have a buyer and they're looking for a property just like yours. Are you thinking about selling? Would you be interested in selling if I could bring you the right price? Hey, I'm your girl. Can I come over this afternoon? Let me take a look at it. Because even if it doesn't work for this buyer, I may have some other buyers that may work for. Just get your foot in the door. Form the relationship.